Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I'm going to do another book review, or I should say several book reviews. I think there are about three books. Yeah, so I'm going to talk on three books, if not four. And I'm going to give you some examples of why I recommend these books to you. In my last video, I did a book review on a book called As a Man Thinketh. Let me just go back here real fast so I can actually kind of give you a little touch up here, right here. Okay. So, I've got my notes right here too, so I can actually go by them. So, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Thoughts become reality, mind as a garden. Character is destiny, and taking responsibility for how you think and what actions basically befall that application. Now, I've also touched on The Science of Being Well by Wallice D. Wattles as well, and I kind of did a little bit more digging on that one. Physical health, thinking, acting, and eating. Okay, and this produces the power of thought. It produces the acting in a certain way, the principle of life and practical habits. Okay. Now, you'll see where I'm going with this in just a few minutes. So let me get to the other couple of books here. The Way of the Pilgrim by Nina A. Toumanova. I probably butchered her last name, and if I did, I do apologize. This was a Russian classical writing type book, and it deals with faith. It deals with one's journey. Okay, and the gnosis that you gain from the experience. Okay, so basically, prayer and faith coincide with just about anything you do. You have to have faith in yourself, in what you do, but you've also got to have your deity. Depending on what religion you're in, most people will go by God or Jesus. Other people will go by Satan or Lucifer. And then you got the folk saints like Santa Morte, the Orisha, the Loa, the old pagan gods, if you're into paganism and Wicca. But they don't really go very far with this stuff. So you want to look through the intimacy through faith. Where is your faith put into? The power of prayer. Have you ever thought about prayer in a way that coincides with everything that you do in life, from dealing with your family? One of the biggest things that women have said is that they love the fact that their men in their lives ask a deity to watch over them. Okay? Very insightful to hear about that. Not just to see it. Okay? Not just them, your partner, but also, if you have a family, like, say, children and everything, you're asking a deity to open up the doors for fruition, but also to watch over your family and to help them prosper. Okay? So you got that intimacy through faith, but also the power in prayer. And another application of this is I've seen zealots, and I'm going to call them zealots because it really is a zealotry type thing. I have seen where people have put so much stock in prayer, that they are hopping up and down in a church. I have seen where they believe so much in their God that they overcome things like cancer, overcome debt, overcome physical applications of this world, things that occur in this world. And it is amazing to see how those doors open. And I think the way of the pilgrim really opened up the doors for that prospect of observation. A lot of people hurry between point A to point B as quickly as possible. You get up, you go to work, you come home. Done. You know, you get up, you go to bed. You know, they don't really sit there and go, well, what did I do that was constructive today that's going to benefit me and my family? How about my journey? How about the way I think? How I approach things? You know, a lot of this stuff is something that is simplistic to do, especially if you're in the left hand path or the right hand path practices, especially spiritualism. And you'll see where this goes in just a few minutes after I get done this last book. So, knowing what I just put into play here, okay, for book recommendations, As a Man Thinketh, The Science of Being Well, The Way of the Pilgrim, and now A Sovereign Individual by James Dale Davidson. Now think about this. Nationalism, individual control, individual's independence, information society. How does this play into one's faith? How does this play into the alchemy of your inner man versus the outer man, or vice versa, the inner woman and the outer woman? Okay, because this isn't about sex. It goes or gender. It comes down to both aspects. What your outer person, your outer man or woman becomes, starts with who you are internally and what you build. Okay, and I want to make that clear. So in this case, if we're dealing with the physical applications, you're dealing with the digital economy, self-ownership, libertarianism, decentralization, and forecasting national states. Okay, think about what I just said right there. Digital economy. What is the biggest thing that we're dealing with worldwide? The economy is strained. Financial prosperity is on the verge of collapse. People are constantly worried about making ends meet. People are stressed about how they're going to provide for their families. How are they going to supply a home for themselves, their pets, and their families? How are they going to just get by day in and day out? And what is it about lack of discipline, lack of focus? How many people have made a plan? Okay, let's say, for example, you have a goal to become a phlebotomist. What steps did you take to become a phlebotomist? How far did you get in that before you lost interest? Okay, think about that for just a minute. If your goal is seeking validation and not in bettering yourself or your family, you're basically bearing bad fruit. Okay, it's corrupted fruit, because it's no longer about self-mastery and self-control. It's not about growth and prosperity. It becomes corrupted, and it comes down to the way you think. And like I said, I'll get into this in just a minute, because I'm going to give you a few definitions here, I guess you can call it. Examples. A lot of people spend most of their time, when they're not, even if they are working or not working, if they go to a religious event, let's say a pagan festival, or they go to church. I took my son to a Pentecostal church the other day, just because he wanted to see what it was like to find a church. He wanted to go to church for the first time. And like I said, my son is 8 years old. And he's in that area of the second stage of life which is basically trying to please daddy, be like daddy, and so forth. So, whereas the first stage was his connection to his mother. The third stage is 14 to adulthood. So you got birth to 7 years old, which is about him and his connection to his mother. 7 to 14 years old is his connection to me. And then you have 14 to adulthood, which is him finding his own path. Okay? So I took him, and he really liked the music and he liked the atmosphere, but he was more interested in, you know, sitting there and trying to figure things out. But while I was watching him, I was also watching other people. Okay? We literally sat down front, and as they say in Brujeria, um, a book by, oh, what's her name? And I apologize, I can't think of her name. It was a woman that practiced North Mexican and Southern United States Brujeria. She put out like 2 books on Brujeria, and I own them both. Very, very good books. But one of the stories that she put forth was the witch or warlock is not always in the back, but in the front. Okay? And as a bishop that I once knew years ago said, I am the gatekeeper. Okay? Evil will not pass this stage, this altar. That was his words. And so you see 2 different definitions of that application of thought. But like I said, a lot of people, like I said, I watched 2 to 4 people just down front in full view of the minister, the reverend, and the visiting pastor playing on their phones repeatedly through prayer, through the overall sermon, and even through the ending. Music, okay? Constantly pulling out their phones, looking at it, scrolling through messages and on their phones and everything. This is decentralization, okay? It's the lack of self-discipline, the lack of focus. You're being distracted by cheap thrills. As I told a friend of mine, I held up his phone and I said, this is a $10,000 distraction. That's all it is. Even my son knows that when he's at school or he's doing his homework, even if he goes to a religious event, the phone goes off. There is no technology. An hour when you get up and an hour before bed. No technology. Why? You look at what's on TV. You look at the ads. You look at what plays on the radio. You got advertisements for the latest products. You got advertisement for companies and corporations. You got constant fear factory by what's going on in the world. Okay? This is decentralization because you're so focused on technology and cheap thrills that you're not paying attention to rise in your own apotheosis. Okay? So they're taking away the independence of the individual, taking away your control by telling you that if you do this, you're going to lose this. If you do this, you're going to be taxed over here. Wow. Okay? And in the past, information you had to seek out. You had to seek out it within the hermeneutic perspective of gnosis, that which is hidden. So you had to seek it out. Nowadays, you're overstimulated. All that information is hitting you right here on your laptop, your iPad, your cell phone, your TV, the radio stations. Everything is in your face that you're over centralized. So basically, you've gotten so much information that everything, you don't even know where to begin. You don't even see it. So decentralization is a major thing through the national states. Same thing with finances. Same thing with job security. It's all to keep you occupied so that you're not growing, because those in power would have to share the wealth. And they don't want that. They want you deaf, dumb, and stupid. Plain and simple. So, as I said, you'll see where I'm going with this, and this is where I'm going to go with it right now. Jeremiah, and I'm going to do this from a couple of different perspectives. The first is going to be from the biblical. Okay, I'm talking about the Bible, the Christian Bible. Just so you can get a reference, because most people understand the Bible. They've read the Bible, but unfortunately, ministers today don't touch on these topics. It's always about baptism. It's about, the revivals and how to get into heaven and reducing the devil's BS. That's all it comes down to for them these days. So to see it this way is kind of cool. All right. So Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 19 talks about the fruit of thought. Your thoughts, as Wallace Wattles put it, really can create a healthy body, a healthy mind, and a calm state. Okay? Proverbs 23, verse 7, man thinks he becomes. Think about that for just a minute. If you work on your inner man or woman, then your outer man or woman will mirror that reflection. So by feeding one, you're feeding the other, either consciously or unconsciously. Like, how do you command a room? Do you just walk in and just walk straight to a table? Or do you walk into a room, shoulders back, stand there for a second, taking your time to gaze your surroundings? Your actions speak louder than words. Okay? So when you are observing your surroundings, you're not talking, you're not speaking, you're not running your mouth. You walk into a place, you observe, and then you calmly, purposely walk to the table or to the bar, wherever you are, and you sit down. You listen more than you speak. What does that say? Actions speak louder than words, right? Your thoughts are clear because you're listening and asking questions rather than just talking. Okay? So, what a man thinks, he becomes. Matthew chapter 12, verses 33 through 35. Trees identified by their fruits. Now, the ironic part is, I believe this is also spoken of not just in parable by Jesus of Nazareth, but also in the book of Corinthians. I think it's 1 Corinthians chapter 11, if I'm not mistaken. And it talks about, you show me your dead works, and I will show you my good works and my good deeds. So the tree is a firm foundation, and the branches represent your thoughts, your actions, your deeds, your words. Everything that you do in life has a branch on that tree. How you're viewed, how are you respected? Are you non-respect? People not respecting you. Are you somebody who's undisciplined, or are you disciplined? Okay? The fruit that you bear is represented by your thoughts and your deeds. Okay? So fruits of the Spirit, or in this case, the trees are identified by its fruits, is something that is very, very good, and something that you need to take a great reflective gander at. The next one is Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? And I want you to think about this for just a minute, because what does it mean, the fruit of the Spirit? You have the fruit of the mind. You've got the three bodies: mind, body, spirit. How do you bring them together? How do you separate them? How do you identify them? You know, what kind of man or woman do you want to be? Okay? How do you want to be viewed or remembered? How do you want to represent your family, your place of employment, your independent faith, for an example, or the gods that you work with? Okay? Think about that. As a minister, you have to represent your deity in your community, so you're stuck in that intermediary. So much like a royal princess or prince, you have to carry yourself with a certain etiquette. Okay? You have to abide by certain rules. The rules may suck, but they're there because you are considered to be an elder or a ruling faction. Okay? So the fruit of the Spirit is represented by the fruit that is grown or created by your actions and words, and how you represent yourself. Romans chapter 12, verse 2, the renewal of the mind. You know, a lot of religions speak to this. Think of meditation, reflection. What is remote viewing practices? Okay? The samurai between the 14th and 19th century spent a lot of time within nature. They communed with nature. They would sit there, meditate in a field. They would reflect on their practices, their way of life, their family, their gods, depending if it's Buddhism or Shintoism. Christianity, obviously, it's Jesus of Nazareth, or just plain God in general. If you're into pagan and Wiccan, you've got numerous different types of gods and goddesses from the pantheons worldwide. Okay? But a lot of people, when they renew their mind, they're meditating upon their day-to-day activities. Think about it like this. You come home from the workday. You put yourself in a meditative state. You reflect over everything that you've done during that day. Did you find something that you didn't complete, that you could have handled better? Maybe it was an association, something that caught your attention. Perhaps it was something that you forgot to file at work. Maybe something you were short on. You know, maybe there was something you could have done better or done more of. Like, say, maybe put out a couple extra trays of product. For an example, let's say eggs and sausage if you're into fast food, or maybe a different type of stocking, practice that would help produce more stocking and more, product being put on the floor if you're into sales. Maybe as a manager, you could have handled something better that was a situation between colleagues and employees. Who knows? Okay? But the renewal of the mind is something that allows you to reflect, putting yourself back in the right state of mind. And if you read As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, or The Science of Being Well by Wallice D. Wattles, there are two things that will come to fruition within your perspective. And this goes along with things like Tai Chi, for an example. Things like your health. How about the science? How about the On the Shortness of Life by Seneca, for an example? I've talked about that in the past video. That could also be a part of this little reading thing if you want. Think about it like this. If you Observe yourself. Do you know how much pressure you put on yourself? Do you know how much negativity you bring? How much positivity do you place on any given day? You know, as a practicing necromancer, there was a model that was put forth by my elders, and the scale was like this. If you take a straight line like this, okay, and then you do a wavy line like so, anything above that center line is considered positive. Anything below it is considered to be negative. Now think about it from the chakras, the kundalini, or even the meridians. 3 different practices from different religions, different philosophies. Think about mental health. How about disease? How about manifestation practices? Did you ever stop to think about how the way you look at any given situation can be either a positive or a negative? Look at the Klapoth, the tree of life, or the tree of Da'ath. Each sphere represents either a god or goddess, a different scenario dealing with the body, from the mind to the body to the spirit, both in negative and positive attributes. Now picture this. If you learn to identify the currents, if you learn to apply certain practices, like say bringing a positive attitude or outlook to say something that was a negative. Let's say, for an example, you help somebody out, okay? You help somebody out and it turns out they are a prostitute, okay? A very well-known prostitute. And all of a sudden, let's say, for an example, that prostitute starts threatening you. So what do? What's your first instinct? They're threatening your job, your home, your family, right? So the first instinct is to go to the cops. Number 1, bad idea. Okay, and this is why. Yeah, you can go to the cops, but what do they do exactly? What do they do exactly? Number 1, they're going to have you fill out a report. They're going to try to, let's say, manipulate you. Okay? They're going to try to put a spin on it that's going to benefit them. Probably even put something towards you. Let's say, for an example, you give money to this woman. After she threatens you, you go to the cops, and all of a sudden you find out she's a known prostitute. Now you've been charged with a misdemeanor. I believe it's let's say, for an example, it's a class D or E misdemeanor. Okay, depending on where you are in the country or in the world. Now, let's say, for an example, they turn around and nail you with engaging a prostitute. Wow. Okay, so now you got your ass in a sling. They don't just arrest her for soliciting or to do what she does, which would be illegal in most states, but they've also nailed your ass to the wall. Wow. Okay. So now you'll probably either get a misdemeanor charge, you'll probably have to pay a fine. If you're lucky, probably probation, and so forth. So, did it prosper you? Or did it bring you down? Think about that. So if it brings you down and it pisses you off, now you're in a very negative state of mind. Because number 1, you know you fucked up by going to the cops. Number 2, you fucked up, period, by giving her money. You should have let her deal with her own shit. Okay? Because you can't control how other people are feeling about you. You can't, if they don't like you, that's on them. Why would you allow yourself to get pissed off? Why would you get into a negative state? But instead, because you engaged, you brought this on yourself. So now you have all this other shit to contend with, not just her. So think about this. You could have let that get to you, or you can think of it as a life lesson. Not to trust people, and definitely don't trust the law. The law is corrupt as it is because they're only going to look out for themselves. It's about this. How do I get revenue? How do I meet my goals? They have to have a certain amount of slips per month. You don't matter to them. They don't look at it for advice. They don't give it to you for anything because it's considered a civil act. They're just there to collect a paycheck. That's it. If they don't have to fill out paperwork, if they can get something easy, they're going to take it. Because they know that they're government employees. You, on the other hand, are just a civilian, so they can fuck you over which way but Sunday. So here it is. Thoughts. How do you renew your mind? How do you bear good fruit? How does your tree build good fruit? Well, first of all, get away from distractions. Get away from and limit anything that is going to desensitize you. Delve more into your apotheosis. Delve more into your education. Build and become a creator for you and your family. That thought form is going to prosper you more than anything else. Why work for a paycheck when you can get money to work for you? Take a few courses. Okay? Think about this. If you take a few courses or you do some research into financial or investing, okay? Just as an example, you can easily begin investing. Okay? That's number one. Think about it like this. 4 years ago, I started investing. Okay? I started with Amazon. I started with CCL. Okay? Now, my Amazon stock was actually a free stock. It was something free I got. And it was a full stock. Okay? The LLC was recommended to me because it's all year around. Okay? And I went from there. I went into technology, hospitality, financial, rare metals, SMR, which is nuclear, which goes into power plants, the warships, obviously the bombs that, the military and all them use. And then you deal with the power plants and everything that are throughout this country and other countries. So you're dealing with all that. But here it is. Then you can get into Bitcoin and Coinbase investing. So if one of these fails, you got the others to sit back on. So you have a well-rounded scope of investment. Okay? But you can take it further. Learning about what money is, what kind of rare metals, such as gold or silver, brass, things that are very rare that don't build up interest. It just sits there. The government can't do shit with it. Well, guess what? I'm now worth over $21,000 just in gold alone. Wow. Because I have all that 4.96. Right there. 4.96 in gold. And I'm not going to read the rest of it because you don't need to know it. But all you need to know is it's equivalent to $21,000+ in that alone. In 4 years of investing. Wow. Okay. Now you add the rest of that in. Amazing, right? But let's say, for an example, you do some more research. What's an asset compared to a liability? How do you balance your balance sheets? Wow, from expenditures and income. Wow, okay. Let's say, for an example, you do some more investing. You start learning about how to lower your debt, how to make deals, understanding how to purchase things like cars, how to make money while you're paying things off, like your house or your car. Wow, okay. These are things that will benefit you. You're not thinking positive and you're not thinking negative. You're just learning how to do things. So it's power of thought. Wow. Okay. So what do these books have in common? They teach you to think. They teach you to be spiritual about it, to be passionate, to think for yourself. And that's the great part about these books that I've been putting forth. It's not just about bettering yourself. It's about you becoming an individual and making decisions clearly for yourself. Okay? So again, think about where you are now. Think about where you want to be, what steps you want to take. Are you going to take a few courses on, let's say, for example, you get 5 books on finances, how to get, let's say Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. How about Modern Money Mechanics by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago? How about Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill? That's a great book right there alone, those last 2 books that I mentioned. Well, actually, all 3 of them are good books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad teaches you about assets, about liabilities, about the taxes, about how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, how to make those differential perspectives and decisions. But then you have Modern Money Mechanics, which teaches you how the banking system works. It teaches you what is valuable and what is least valuable from the banking perspectives, from the mint all the way down to the federal banks to the civil banks. Wow, okay. Then you got Think and Grow Rich. What does that book do? It teaches you that if you can think it, you can manifest it. The sovereign individual does the exact same thing. Just goes into actual physical applications, whereas Think and Grow Rich teaches you more through stories. Living the dream, if you will. Hard work pays off. I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Remit. What does his book teaches you? How to purchase things, how to make a deal and dwindle things down through bargaining. How to get rid of debt. How to get a great deal with a lower interest to prosper yourself. What is Hide Your Assets and Disappear by Arianna Huffington put forth? Well, first of all, it teaches you about things that can be used against you in a court of law versus a thing where, like, say, just to give you a couple perspectives on this book. Number one, a will. People will ask you all the time, especially those that are dying. People always go out and get a will. They'll hire an attorney. They'll have a living will and testimony. Wow. But what they don't tell you is that the family can take you to court and detest it. But if you put it into a trust, you remove your name and put it in the trust in a specific deed, and clearly state that it can never be sold, it can never or leave the family. Wow. They can't detest that. They cannot sell it for anything because it has to remain in the family. And what's even better, the government can't get their grubby little fucking fingers on it. unlike the personal living will and deed, the will and testimony, because then they get a fraction of it through taxes. It's like having investments. When you learn to invest, you can have it automatically reinvested. Why? Because for long-term investing, it builds the wealth. It builds the interest. And the IRS can't touch it. Under the 1031 revenue code, they cannot touch it because it's being reinvested. Wow. Just that little bit of knowledge. That's where education comes in. And you wonder why this channel and everything I do is about education. It's about enlightenment. It's about bettering myself and you. So think about that for just a moment. Now, how do you disappear? Well, think about this for just a moment. You can learn what countries are neutral, where your government can't touch your property. You can put, like I said, put your everything you own in a trust and have it transferred to, say, a neutral bank, like, say, the DR, Dominican Republic, or how about a Norwegian bank? Wow. Learn to change your name, get a cell phone that doesn't, that's considered a burner phone. Wow, okay. Learn how to get rid of, say, for an example, your location on it. How to turn off certain things so people and governments and third-party factions, like, say, debt collectors, can't trace you. Don't tell anybody. Learn about where you can go and disappear for like a month or two before you actually disappear. Wow. Have your money transferred to one bank and then transferred to another bank. Different things. Ariana Huffington did an awesome job on that book. Amazing job. So you see, just by the power of thought, through the power of prayer, through religious worship, you can bear good fruit. Physically. The Bible is full. Just the Christian Bible alone is full of this. But a lot of people will take this as, oh, you're not supposed to eat of the tree of good and evil. This is why Adam and Eve were kicked out of the fucking garden. Really? Were they kicked out of the garden, or did they choose to leave the garden? It did not say they were kicked out. Think about that. In fact, it says there's two cherubims standing at the gate. What is a cherubim? It's a tree. It's a shrub. Now look at your brain. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere. What's in the middle? The pineal gland. What is the pineal gland? But it activates the third eye. Constant prospering, enlightenment, thought. So thinking is something that is very, very powerful in every aspect of your life. And that's what I'm trying to convey here. If you can think it, you can manifest it. But you got to take the time to think about everything you're doing. Reflect on it. Meditate on it. Okay? And that, I guarantee it, will benefit you more. So put down your phone, your technology. Take 20 minutes of complete silence. Do an hour of complete silence. Sit in complete darkness if you have to. I guarantee it, 2-3 days into that, putting yourself in that routine is going to benefit you. You're going to start hearing your soul. You're going to start hearing your mind, your thoughts. You're going to start speaking to your own body, your own godhood. And that's going to be a blessing, because you're not going to want to go back. You're not going to want to go back to that slavehood. You don't want to go back to that stagnation, that dead-end job. You're going to constantly seek out apotheosis, self-mastery, self-evolution, godhood. It's in Hinduism. It's in Buddhism. Christianity. Satanism. Wow. Pagan and Wiccan traditions. Look at the food of the gods. Abersia. Wow. Eat thereof the fruit of the gods, and you become a god. Wow. Awakening moment. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. So I want you to think about these books that I've been putting forth. I want you to go out and get them. Purchase them. You can get them off Amazon. You can get them off eBay. You can get them off Everend if you want audiobooks. But I personally recommend the actual book because there's nothing like the texture, using your imagination, picturing everything that you're reading, taking actual fucking notes. I've got over 50 books right now that I'm reading. And I started this back on January 1st. Dedicated myself to reading 47 books in a year. We're now on month 8, about halfway through. And I've read quite a few books. I'm basically reading one book a week, if I can. The Gulag Archipelago was probably the longest freaking book I've ever read. Spoke on the darkness aspects of the human soul, the mind. And I can tell you that took me a while. War and Peace was another one that took me quite a while to get through. It was definitely boring, dry reads, but guess what? Educated. It's enlightening. It's going to take you, some books are going to take you a while to get through. Reading 10 minutes a day. Get into that routine. You know, in Shinobi, there is a practice where if you can't do, say, 5 sets of a workout, do a fraction of it. You still get that routine going. Same time every day. The only difference is the location changes. But you still get that routine in. So read 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour a day. Read a chapter a day. Hell, if you want to do more than that, feel free. But just apply yourself. And that's what it comes down to. The only thing that prevents you from doing it is you. But you got to think about positive and negative attributions. If I don't get into a routine, how am I going to grow? If I sit there and do the same shit as before and not change anything, what's the fucking point of doing it? It's just a waste of energy. It's a waste of time. But if you go out with the mind state of, I'm going to get these books, I'm going to study these books, and I'm going to apply them to my life. I'm going to experiment with them out in society. Wow. I wonder what changes can be made. Maybe the way I react to things. Perhaps the way I view somebody else's actions. For an example, I'm going to give you 2 examples. There's a apostolic church. In fact, it was a minister friend of mine that got me into the ministry years ago. In fact, it was him who recommended the ministry. Well, I hadn't seen him in quite a long time. Years, to be precise. And I looked at him one day when I had shown back up because he had asked me for a favor, and he and I were talking, and another patron came over, another member of his congregation came over and was inquisitive. And there were 2 applications here. Number 1, I said, if he wants you to know, he'll tell you. Or he'll preach it. But the business was between me and him, not you. Think about that. I caught the smirk on this minister's face. My minister friend had a smirk because he knew that how I handled that was something new. He'd never seen that from me before. Not once. The other application was this. When I looked at him and said, it's my problem, not yours. Because he asked me one day, how are you doing? And I said, not good. He says, brother, what's going on? And I said, don't worry about it. It's my problem, not yours. He smiled again. This is why. You can go into any application of the Christianized Bible, and it will tell you two things. One, every man, woman, and child has their own trials and their own tests. If you go into Satanism, you are the one that's responsible and accountable for your actions. In civilization and socialism, you are the one that's accountable and held accountable, not just responsible for the things that you do and say. If you choose to steal, lie, you're corrupting your own tree of life. If you choose to be honorable and to put the work in and actually change and apply what you're learning to your life, that's growth. That's fruition. The tree is going to prosper. That's what I mean by accountability and responsibility. And it begins here. It belongs in here. You begin with the inner man or woman, and what you do there and what you forge is projected to the outer. Amazing knowledge right there. These books touch on this. I've given you numerous sources and references throughout these videos. I've also made myself available to people. Okay? That's something that's honorable, because honor will come if you apply it and you stick to it like glue. You constantly grow and constantly evolve. Mizash Kendall, what are you talking? Welcome to the channel. Jews did. I don't give two craps about the Epstein files, and that's your choice to laugh your ass off. That's on you and you alone. That's your actions, and you have to be accountable for that. All right. The Epstein files, I should say, are myth until somebody actually puts it out there and shows proof that it exists. Until then, it's like the UFO files. Speculation. That's all it is. It's assumptions. People can say whatever the hell they want to say. But until it's backed up with actual proof, actual evidence, it's nothing but a rumor. It's he said, she said, especially in a court of law. So if you want to be nothing but that, that's on you. But anyways, I've said my piece. I've said what I came on to say. I've spoken about those 3 books that I wanted to talk about. And this is based off thinking. So with that said, I want to thank everybody who's jumped on here with me. I appreciate it. If you like what I do and want to hear more, feel free to hit that subscribe button, that notification button. I hear it helps the algorithm. Not sure if it's true, but it's just what people say. As for those of you who are coming in after this video ends, I want to take the time to thank you. And hopefully you subscribe and hit that notification button so you can be notified when I'm on again. And believe me when I tell you, I got a lot more books to go through. All right. With that said, I'm out. So have a good night or a good day wherever you are in the world. I'm out. And until next time.